So I want to talk about some changes that have now come up with the SBA. So this is really cool. So if we think about this from a seller perspective, and you as a buyer, these are some new changes now that are effective as of May 2023. This allows us to gain more control of the deal with less cash out of our pocket. So according to the SBA, they now allow the seller to stay in more than a year if they're retaining ownership. So now I can get the seller to stay in for up to 19%. Could I get them to stay in for more? Yes, but there's a problem. I'll get to that in a minute. But I can have them stay up for 19% equity ownership in the business, and they can stay past a year. So I could have them as what's called that key employee. So maybe that seller has very specific knowledge. They know how to run the business. They love it, but they don't want to be an owner anymore. They just want to work in the business, but they like working, but they want to sell the business, get rid of all the other headache. They just want to be the employee. Okay, they can still be the employee, they can still run it, but they don't have the obligation of dealing with payroll and staff and stuff like that, but they may be a really good salesperson, let's say. And so I might want to keep them on board. So sellers do not have to guarantee the buyer's loan if they retain less than 20% equity. What's happened in the past is that the bank, the SBA lender, okay, the SBA is not a bank, it's a government program, guarantees a bank, and there's hundreds of banks that do SBA loans. So an SBA loan, if the seller retains 20% equity, he's going to have to personally guarantee that loan from us as a buyer coming in and get an SBA loan. And the sellers, of course, going to say, well, I don't want to do that because it puts them on the hook. So if you keep them at 19%, guess what? They don't have to guarantee any loan by the SBA, which means you have more control of the deal, but you're able to keep them in. In other words, I can reduce my purchase price down. Let's say it's $1 million business and I give them 19% equity. I've reduced my purchase price of that business down by $190,000 after I've negotiated the best deal. But let's say it's $1 million. I've now reduced it down to 190. Let's do the math of just say 200, make it 20% for easy math. Now I only have to think about doing a deal with the SBA at 800,000 versus $1 million. So that it changes my down payment requirement. It changes the terms for the debt coverage ratio for the bank. Everything gets better because the seller is holding equity. You also have this whole 10% equity. The down payment can be satisfied by the company if the seller rolls their equity and the balance sheet is strong enough to pass a 9-to-1 debt to worth ratio. So that whole debt coverage ratio, that's what we're looking at. If the loan is small enough and the profit of the business is high enough, then we might be able to go in this entire thing with no money down at all using an SBA loan, and we use a 10% equity down payment. But if we have 19%, that would actually work out even better because it would increase this debt to worth. So instead of it being 10% equity injection, which is what they normally want to see from you and me as a buyer, because I'm using the seller's 19% equity, that can be rolled in as a down payment and makes the deal look better. So you have to talk with each individual lender. Each lender is going to have different requirements. Yes, these are the basics that the SBA says, but each lender is going to have different guidelines on how they want to give the loan to you, even though the SBA is guaranteeing it. So just because one lender says no doesn't mean they're all going to say no. You just need to keep calling to different SBA lenders. The other thing is that the seller notes could be applied as equity injection into a deal if they're either on a 2-year standby, meaning no payments or interest. It used to be that it had to be a 10-year standby, but now it's just a 2-year standby, or if it's interest-only payments that are required on the note. You still have to make some kind of a minimum cash buyer injection, meaning they're probably going to still want us to make a 10% down payment. It might be 5%, just depends again on the lender. But these are good. This is good news for us because now the SBA, they're trying to streamline the process so we can get the seller. If you think about it, if I'm doing a $3 million deal, and let's just make the math easy in our head, and I'm doing 20% that's held by the seller, well, 3 times 20%, that's 600,000. I just reduced my purchase price of the business down by 600,000, and I keep the seller in there as a key employee who will continue to run the company for me. So I don't have to hire an outside operator. I may, depends on what I want to do with the business, but theoretically, I could keep the seller in there to run the business the same way they always have. They keep 20% in there, so they get an equity kicker. They get an upside on the business as it makes profit and as it grows. And we exit later, they will be able to sell that additional 20% for a second payday later down the road. But it has reduced my $3 million acquisition down to $2.4 million, which makes it easier to finance. And I can use that $600,000 as down payment on the deal. So I may not have to put any cash into the deal at all. So tell me, what do you guys think about these new guidelines from the SBA? Does this have interest to you? Is this something that you might want to apply? And granted, we will do this with you. Okay, so don't worry. We have lenders that will do this. I just want to know what your feedback is on it.